Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And today we're talking about psychology. It's our psychology unit for today, for the month of November. Yeah, what goes on in the mind? How can we figure out how people think, and how can we use this information to help us get ahead in life and make a ton of money?
I haven't seen this word for a while, pratfall. Tom and I were talking about it before we started today and how it used to just mean that someone fell down on their butt. They ended up like slipping and then falling down on their butt. But now it just means something that you do that's embarrassing. It's usually a physical thing, so you might trip. I've tripped in Taiwan and fallen, and first thing I do is I look around to see who saw me. Oh, how embarrassing. But it's actually something that's been studied. And this Elliot Aronson that we're going to talk about is the one who started it. He coined the term, or he made it up. That was his contribution to psychology, and demonstrated how it worked. So I thought it was really interesting. It might be something that you're interested in. Psychology itself is kind of fascinating, I think. So we're just going to be talking about what this pratfall effect is, and you might recognize it in your own life and how you react to people who have pratfalls.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to encourage you all to fall down on purpose. You might actually break your bones or something.
Yeah.
But we are going to talk about the times when this does happen, when you kind of make a fool of yourself in certain situations, and how that can work to your advantage. So let's get to it. Let's listen to the entire contents of today's lesson one time.
A basketball star falls over on his way to receive his NBA championship ring. He gets up, smiling, and the fans love him even more, as his blunder has shown he makes mistakes like everyone else. This is an example of the pratfall effect. Elliot Aronson, a social psychologist at the University of California, coined the term pratfall effect and demonstrated it with an experiment. A speaker gave an interview in which he answered questions correctly and came across as highly competent. A second speaker gave the same interview but delivered a merely average performance. One version of each interview finished there, while at the end of an alternative version, the men spilled coffee on themselves. All the interviews were recorded, and listeners gave their impressions of the interviewees. The competent man was considered more likable when he'd spilled the coffee. In contrast, the average man was less likable. People can use the pratfall effect to their advantage. If, during a job interview, a candidate admits to a few minor flaws, this will make them appear more genuine. However, the mistakes shouldn't cast doubt on their ability to do the job, and only someone who's already made a good impression should try this strategy. Successful brands highlight criticisms made against them for the same reason. For example, some people can't stand Marmite, a food spread from the UK. The company acknowledges this and uses it to make amusing advertising campaigns. Of course, these only work because Marmite is already a successful brand. So, while the pratfall effect encourages us not to worry about being perfect all the time, remember that it only helps those who already seem to be winners.
Okay, let's get to it. Let's discuss the contents of today's lesson right now, shall we? So, again, it's our unit on psychology, and here's the title. It says, Imperfections can be perfect with the pratfall effect. So, imperfection, that's something that is not perfect, okay? So, if you're a manufacturer of a certain product and someone discovers that your product has imperfections, that could be big trouble for you. There's something wrong with your product. There's a flaw or something like that, and you'll have to recall those products and fix them or remanufacture them or something because they've got an imperfection, something that doesn't make it perfect. A flaw, you could say. And also it's interesting because our writer has used the word imperfection in the same sentence as the word perfect. Imperfection, something that's not perfect, and something that is perfect means it has no flaws. But if you have imperfections, that could be perfect for you if you're using the pratfall effect. And as Stephanie said earlier, pratfall means to fall on your bum.
Well, that was the original definition. Now it just means, kind of doing something that's really embarrassing. Typically, people are falling. We've got our own example. We've got a basketball star. He's very athletic. He's really coordinated. You look at athletes and you think, oh, they would never fall down or trip over their feet. But this basketball star actually does. He falls down on his way to receive his NBA championship ring. So it's probably live TV. People are watching, of course. And, that's really embarrassing as an athlete to trip over your own feet. Now, if you're getting a championship of something, it means you've been in a competition with other people or teams. In this case, it's the NBA. So they've been playing other basketball teams. And the team that comes out on top, they're the champions. And championship is the adjective form. So it's a championship ring, which is quite big, very expensive, and pretty cool to have if you're an athlete.
Right, so if you win the championship, as did the Toronto Raptors earlier this year, then you'll get a championship ring, and they're presented in a special ceremony. So you're supposed to go up to the stage and get it. In this particular case, the basketball star fell over, and then he gets up, he smiled, but the fans love him even more. Oh, isn't that cool? He's a star, we love him, and now he's kind of just like us. He's kind of clumsy. He fell down. He committed this blunder. Okay, his blunder has shown that he makes mistakes like everyone else. Blunder is basically when you make a mistake, when you're trying to be perfect, but you kind of screw up. You just don't do something right, and you kind of neglect something. You forgot something, and you ended up making a fool of yourself. But again, if you're a famous person like a basketball player, people will love you even more.
It's true. Yeah, a blunder can be something physical, something you do wrong and embarrassing physically. Or could be you're just talking and you have to blunder your way through your presentation because you didn't prepare enough before. Yeah, so people can see those sorts of things, though. So this is our example, and it's a great example of the pratfall effect. Moving on, we've got a social psychologist who is probably a professor at the University of California. His name is Elliot Aronson. If you're a psychologist, you practice in the field of psychology. Some of them are more research psychologists, and others are actually psychologists that meet, daily with patients and help them combat some of their mental issues, some of the problems they're having. Well, he does a lot of research, and he coined or came up with the term. It was his actual idea to come up with this term, pratfall effect. And he demonstrated it with a really interesting experiment. So we've got the experiment here. We've got a speaker who gave an interview in which he answered questions correctly, and he came across as highly competent. To come across as something means this is how people are viewing you. Not how you view yourself, guys. It's how others see you. So he came across as really competent or highly competent. If you're competent, you know what you're doing. And other people aren't afraid to trust you if they ask you for advice, or maybe you're a chef and they consider that you're quite competent. You won't burn their food or poison them. You're good at something if you're competent.
Right, and of course the opposite is incompetent.
Yeah.
Sometimes, of course, we have political leaders who are considered incompetent and they don't get re-elected in the next election. And then a second speaker gave the same interview but delivered a merely average performance. Okay, so this person did not come across as being highly competent. Yeah, he probably answered some of the questions correctly. Other ones he didn't really know, so he was kind of an average speaker and delivered an average performance.
Maybe he even blundered through some of the questions.
Could be, like didn't really answer the question.
Completely, yeah.
Kind of, beat around the bush or something like that. And one version of each interview finished there, while at the end of an alternative version, the men spilled coffee on themselves. So, yes, that's where the interviews ended, but each one at the end of each interview would spill coffee on themselves. This is an alternative version, another version of that interview. One interview was without the spilled coffee, and another version had the spilled coffee, and then they compared the results of the competent speaker and the average speaker and how people reacted to them.
Yeah, how they viewed them, how they came across. You can have lots of alternative versions, guys. Even movies today will sometimes come out on DVD afterwards, and there are alternative endings, or the director has a director's cut. That's an alternative version. Well, these guys, they showed them without spilling the coffee and then spilling the coffee at the end. And then they asked people how they viewed these guys. So all the interviews were recorded, of course, and listeners gave their impressions of the interviewees. Your impression of somebody is how you see them. Maybe it's your first impression, the first time you ever meet them. First impressions are very important. I'm sure everybody out there's heard that. Make a good first impression. Well, their impressions had to do with how the men answered the questions, and also, they spilled their coffee on themselves. Did that impact how they viewed the guys? It did. So if you're interviewing somebody, you're the interviewer. But the person being interviewed is called the interviewee. It's kind of similar to employ. If you employ somebody, you're giving someone a job. The person who's getting the job from you is the employee.
Right, so the listeners gave their impressions of these interviews, and we'll find out what those impressions were in just a second. But right now we're going to take a break and listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hello, my name is Shelby. 出丑效应，犯错让你更讨喜。当一位 NBA 总冠军的球员要领戒指的时候，不小心跌倒，没想到大家却更爱他了。因为他的错误显示出他像其他人一样会犯错。as 是连接词，因为后面加一个副词子句。blunder 是名词，由于粗心而酿造成的错误。常见的用法，例如 a political blunder 政治上的错误，或者 blunder 也可以直接当成动词，表示犯错。例如我们说他又出篓子了 He has blundered again. 有位加州大学教授做实验来佐证出丑效应。在第二段第二句，我们有看到 A speaker gave an interview in which he answered questions correctly and came across as highly competent. 一位受访者接受访谈，他在访谈中答对问题，给人很好的印象。在这个句子当中，我们看到 in which he answered questions correctly and blah blah which 点点点是关系子句 in 介系词，在里头的意思，要搭配表示出在这个访谈中，所以在 which 前面加上了 in。当然，这种访谈是一个情境、情形，所以 in which 也可以改写成 where， 整句就变成了 A speaker gave an interview where he answered questions correctly and blah blah。同一句话中，动词片语 come across as 看上去似乎是，或者让人觉得是怎么样，后面加形容词或者是名词。例如说，我可能看起来瘦瘦的，不过我超爱运动。I come across as a skinny person, but I love sports. 另外少了 as。Come across 本身的另外一个意思叫做不期而遇，也常是出现的重点。比如说 I come across an old friend from school. 我偶遇学生时期的老朋友。文章中提到，除了正规的受访版本，在附加版本中，受访者洒咖啡在身上，引发了不同的效应。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, so remember where we left off, we were talking about two speakers giving a speech. One was a competent speaker, and the other one was an average speaker. But they had these alternative versions of the interviews or of the presentations, and both of them spilled coffee on themselves, and then later listeners gave their impressions of the interviewees. Okay, so you might think that, well, if the competent man gave a great speech but then spilled coffee on himself, you might think, oh, he's an idiot after all. I have a bad impression of him. Whereas the average person, if he spills coffee on himself, well, that's expected. That's what he would normally do.
It's just the opposite.
Yeah, that's what I would guess. That's my guess here, but that's not actually what happened. Here it says the competent man was considered more likable when he'd spilled the coffee. Interesting. I did not expect that. And in contrast, the average man was less likable. Okay, so I thought maybe people might feel sorry for the average man because he spilled coffee on himself. No, they thought he was even more of an idiot. They thought he was a clumsy fool. They thought he was an inept moron or a stupid clown, whereas the competent speaker was just considered, well, you know, that's kind of funny that would happen. He's kind of like the rest of us. We like him even more.
Yeah, I think people are actually quite jealous of people who are really good at things. And so to see them make a mistake, you know, it kind of makes them feel better about themselves, too. I was also reading this pratfall effect has to do with your own self-esteem, you know, and how you feel about yourself. If you have low self-esteem, then it affects whether you think these guys are likable or not. But yeah, if you see someone who's really talented or gifted suddenly make a mistake, you're like, oh, I feel better. They're not perfect either. That's just human nature. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. But the average guy, you know, it probably just added to all the things they thought, you know, he wasn't really very good at. And the first competent guy was, oh, he's human after all. That's kind of what we say. So moving on, people can use the pratfall effect to their advantage. Ooh, how do we actually take this idea and use it in our own lives? That's what we're trying to help you with here. It's very interesting.
It is very interesting, and don't make the mistake of going into a job interview and saying, you know, I have no college education, I totally failed, I don't have any job experience whatsoever, I fall down all the time, all my interpersonal relationships have failed. That's not going to work for you, okay? So be careful here. You have to be successful first before you can do the pratfall effect. So yes, indeed, you can use it to your advantage, and if during a job interview a candidate or candidate admits to a few minor flaws, this will make them appear more genuine. So again, you do have to give a good impression, you have to have a good resume, you have to be dressed professionally, but you might admit to a few minor flaws. Of course, if you're applying for a job, there are many people being considered, and all of those people are candidates. They're people whom the people in the company have to choose from in order to fill this position. So yes, of course, after you've made a good first impression, then you can admit to some flaws, some small problems in your personality.
Right. Tom did give us two pronunciations of this word candidate. They're both correct. You can say candidate, which is what I say, or candidate, which is how Tom typically pronounces that. So if you have a flaw, guys, it reminds me of not a vocabulary word, but one that we talked about in our Big Cats Suffering for Traditional Medicine lecture, defects. A defect is also a flaw, something that's imperfect, not quite right. So if you're in some of these interviews, impress the interviewer first, and then you can start, admitting to a few minor flaws. Don't say something like, well, yeah, I tend to oversleep and come into work late all the time, but I'm sure that won't bother you. Yeah, don't do that. But if you admit to a few minor or very small flaws, things that are wrong with you or your character, this will make them or make you appear more genuine. Genuine here just means real. Don't say genuine. Sometimes you hear that in America in some of the less educated areas of America. It's genuine, real, not phony, not fake, but genuine. You want to appear or have them think, oh, that person's really just, human after all. I kind of like them. If you appear to be perfect and you only brag about yourself, talk about the things you do well, you might turn off the interviewer at that point.
Right. You'll be seen as more sincere, more human. They'll like you more. So, yes, don't be afraid to admit to a few flaws, but again, you still want to make the good impression at first.
True.
And as it says here in the next sentence, however, the mistakes shouldn't cast doubt on their ability to do the job, and only someone who's already made a good impression should try the strategy, which is what we just said. You got to make that impression first, and then you can admit to a few flaws. But, they can't be too big flaws. They shouldn't cast doubt on your ability to do the job. So don't say something like, well, in my last job, I made a big mistake and it cost my company, $2 million in losses. We lost these clients because of my mistake. You don't want to do that, okay? You want to do something like Stephanie said, sometimes I have trouble getting up in the morning, or I put my left shoe on my right foot sometimes. Those are minor flaws.
I wouldn't admit to getting to work late, though. That's not good. But yeah, just some things maybe that you're unable to, leave and go when it's time to leave work because you want to get the job done before you walk out the door. That sometimes makes for a poor work-life balance. Moving on to the final paragraph, successful brands highlight criticisms made against them for the same reason. Now, notice we're saying they're already successful, guys. So you're not going to take a brand that's just making a name for itself and start saying, well, we've got some flaws in our product or flaws in our service. Here we're using a brand Marmite to use them as an example. Now, a criticism is when you express approval or disapproval of something, or you point out some flaws or faults or mistakes of somebody. We have movie critics who write reviews of movies, restaurant critics. Maybe you had a boss who liked to criticize you. Criticisms is the noun form of the verb to criticize.
Right, so of course some brands highlight those criticisms. For example, some people can't stand Marmite. What's that? It's a food spread from the UK. And the company knows all about this. It acknowledges this. They're not stupid. They know some people can't stand it. But they use that to make their advertisements kind of amusing. They have these amusing advertising campaigns, which would be a series of advertisements on TV, the radio, the internet, or in newspapers or magazines.
Yeah, all of your efforts combined can be an advertising campaign or an election. Someone's running for office, they'll have a campaign so that you'll vote for them. Of course, these only work, guys, because Marmite's already a successful brand. The people who love it. Don't taste it, though. That's my advice. It tastes terrible. So while the pratfall effect encourages us not to worry about being perfect all the time, remember that it only helps those who already seem to be winners. So do your best to be perfect so that when you do mess up, it will be seen as something that makes you more human and genuine other than having people look at you and go, oh, he just messes up all the time.
Hopefully we didn't mess up too much in our explanation today. Well, that brings us to the end of our explanation. Let's listen to our flawless Chinese teacher.
这种出丑效应有时候会帮助加分哦。如果本身是一个优秀的人的话，我们在第3段第一句 People can use the pratfall effect to their advantage. 句子当中 use ... to their advantage 表示达到谁的最佳利益，或者有谁善加利用的意思，尤其是在预期可能有伤害出现的情况。你好好的善加利用光线，我们就可以说 use light to your advantage. 还有一个例子来佐证这种出丑效应，在同一段第2句 If during a job interview, a candidate admits to a few minor flaws, this will make them appear more genuine. 在面试期间，如果求职者坦诚一些小错误，这会使他看起来更真诚。句子当中的动词 admit to 后面加名词或 VING 承认。admit 当不及物动词的时候，它后面的 to 是介系词，要接 VING 或者是名词。不过大多数的时候 admit 承认是当及物动词直接加受词，不用 to 也可以。只是有些专家认为 admit to 比起 admit 写法更正式。另外 appear 这个动词也很好用，常当连缀动词使用，意思是看起来、似乎，用法与 seem、look 雷同，后面直接加形容词等。不过 appear 更正式，他看起来很开心，我们就可以说 He seems pleasant 或者 He looks pleasant，又或者 He appears pleasant。 还可以用这个句型 It appears that ...子句，看起来你可能是对的，句子就写成 It appears that you might be right。 最后一段我们看到有公司利用这种效应来行销自家的产品。最后记得，虽然出丑效应鼓励我们无需完美，但要记得它只帮助那些已经是赢家的人。最后一句的后半段 Remember that it only helps those who already seem to be winners. Remember that 名词子句，在这个句型中，一般 that 可以省略，直接 remember 加这件事。这件事用完整句型写出来是名词子句，所以整句变成 Remember, it only helps those who already seem to be winners. 以上是今天的讲解，谢谢收听。
That's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and please make sure to join us once again for another edition of our program. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.